advantage. So for Radiant 6, it was the fact that they were both experienced, founder entrepreneur, local boys as well. They'd done this before locally, and their business is social media monitoring. So what they do is for PR firms in particular, their product, and it's for the customers of public relations firms, their product will comb the known universe in the world of social media and look for instances of a company's mention in the social media sphere. So what they do is they provide terrific analytics. So if you are, if two idiots making pizza post a video on YouTube that is about to trash your brand, do you remember that story? They will be able to tell you that that has occurred and you will be able to respond. So again, this is a business where there's no huge manufacturing facility, nothing like that. This is the ultimate sort of high-tech creative venture. So low cost of customer acquisition was critical because their message and their expertise spread virally, and it came from the most influential PR firm in the United States. They gave their product away for free for 6 months so that they could convince this PR firm that they had something legitimate, and thus started the virtuous cycle. So they basically expended very few resources on getting customers. Others were advocating on their behalf, and they're in the business of social media, so they figured out how to do it very effectively and leverage the blog sphere, and you name it. For HB Studios, kind of the unfair advantage that these folks had, deep networks within electronic arts. As a matter of fact, they bootstrapped the business. They did not require any outside capital because they had a $500,000 contract with EA Sports the minute he set up the operation, because he was so well known, and they used that contract and the prepayment on that to hire a whack of people. So EA was their distribution partner, so all they had to do was sit in the studio and actually develop the games. They didn't have to hunt and peck for customers. EA was right there. So the big brother was EA Sports, married to a local girl, so when you talk about things like being welcomed into the local community, that was an ace in the hole. And again, another common theme here, sort of the low cost of customer acquisition. Didn't have to expend any resources getting business, and had customers immediately just waiting for what they were about to provide. This, I realize, is going to be impossible to read in the handouts that you've got, but we went down the list, and this is articulated in the paper, looking at where the unfair advantages existed. And so, if you take Zyder's approach and you look down this long list and you tack 80% probability of individual events, the combined probability is not 20%. It is 3.5%. You look at all other things being equal in a rural context, it's pretty grim. And then you look at what happened for Radiant 6 and for HB Studios, and the way in which those unfair advantages shift the overall odds of success. So that's the way we really thought about pulling it all together. So our preliminary thoughts on this, I argued hard for the revival, not requiem conclusion. But where we're going to take this going forward is to really look at this notion of unfair advantage. And if you believe that the rural context is inherently much more challenging, and certainly all of our entrepreneurs said that categorically, then the real question is, do they bring something unique to the party if they're in a rural context? Or is there some other unfair advantage that the context itself can provide or help? On the media end, for example, out of sight, out of mind. Is there something on that front? So our way forward is to obviously do more case studies and remove the survivor bias. We have plans for a much larger sample. It's problematic having 15 factors, so we're going to combine those as we go forward, but we didn't want to strip out any of the nuances. So for example, if you talk about customer proximity, there are actually many more facets to that than might be obvious on the surface. And obviously factor in the rural context itself and differences in the rural context. I might add that HB Studios accessed funding from ACOA, the Atlantic Communities Opportunities. Atlantic Canada, that's right. I can never, the acronyms drive me insane. So, but that came much later on. They actually bootstrapped the business, and they used that actually for growth purposes. And I think that's it for my slides, and Yolande had flashed me the 5-minute warning sign. So we have 5 minutes or so for 10 minutes for any questions, comments. You know, this is at the very early stage of this, and so any suggestions for going forward, any other things we should consider, you know, please let me know. Yolande.
I'd like to start by saying that I know several people in the room have responsibility for attracting investors to rural areas and for encouraging people to start new ventures. And I'd like to hear your response. I think I'd love to hear what you say in the light of the difficulties. You know, it's not a level playing field we're hearing. Dan.
Well, I might agree with defining the rural environment as a challenge, especially what you're defining, which are sort of these big go big or go home ventures.
Right.
And really, I think I do economic development in Prince Edward County. The story is somewhat similar. Whether people fall in love with the area or a person, I think that is part of the secret sauce.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have something else going on. I think if you're just an area, just like if you're just a city, so you've got to have a little bit of magic, and that may be different for each individual business as well. But the challenges there are, for us, we have a few people that have chosen our area, and I'm not sure that talent is a problem. It is locally, but attracting the talent isn't. We leverage our assets, lifestyle, lower cost of real estate, et cetera, but it's still it's a limited pool. Not everybody wants to leave the urban environment where there are multiple opportunities.
Right. No, and a funny sidebar story to this whole issue of talent. You know, Lunenburg, Nova Scotia, I don't know, those of you who, is a beautiful spot, is it not?
World Heritage Site.
What was that?
It's a World Heritage Site.
It is. It is just, and so, you know, Jeremy thought this is just going to be absolutely fantastic. They could find some talent, you know, from Halifax. It's not that far. But here's the randomness and the stuff you have to deal with as an entrepreneur. In the gaming industry, most of your developers are male. So guess what? You had all these guys who'd relocated to Lunenburg, and there were no girls for dates. I'm not making that up. So again, you know, when we talk about the odds of success, this is stuff you don't have to deal with when you're in a city, right? You don't have to think about that as a CEO. You're in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. You are scrapping it out to get the game out the door so that you can meet the very aggressive launch schedule that EA has sent. And you are now chartering buses to take guys from Lunenburg, Nova Scotia into Halifax so that they can have a social life. So we sometimes strip out the realities of the day-to-day, and in 24 hours, you're developing products, you know, you're trying to keep everybody happy. It took Jeremy a long time to find a chief operating officer. And again, so you can find the development talent, but to find an experienced executive who could help him grow the business from sort of that startup phase to the next level. He would tell you that that was one of the biggest challenges he had. So I think it's Dan, right? That is the, so I mean, you have to think about some of those. I keep using the term coalface, but some of these unbelievable, just, you know, human nature related items above and beyond the business end of things. Yes?
Just in terms of next steps, one that you might want to look at is the I3 competition in Nova Scotia, which is run by Novacor, Crown Corporation for Innovation. They divide the province into 5 regions, and it's a competitive call. They do all the stuff that the big city guys do. And last round, we had 135 companies come forward, half of them out of rural Nova Scotia. We've been through 3 rounds of I3, and the rural economies are performing pretty well in terms of idea generation and so on. And then they get, as prizes, they get money and capital, but they also get volunteer hours and labor from professionals in their lawyers, accountants, other business people, and so on. So it's an interesting and not terribly expensive
Okay,
experiment.
that's a great idea, thanks.
Just in your centralization and the advantage, can I ask why you're using the concept unfair?
Oh, right.
What makes an unfair advantage?
So that's the venture capital vernacular, where they're always looking for, again, all other things being equal, they're always looking for that edge. And so from an investment perspective, they talk in terms of what is your unfair advantage. So as they evaluate businesses, and everybody says, yeah, well, it's a hot market space, I've done it before, I'm networked, all that good, base level stuff. It is what kind of helps the venture go up to the next level.
So unfair is actually a positive.
It's a very positive thing. That's right. Sorry. Yeah. So this is a challenge when you write a paper with somebody else and they, yeah.
We have just time for this last question.
Yep.
I wanted to point out.
On your desks, you have these mics. So to improve the audio, so we can hear what you're saying, please do grab the nearest mic to you if you're near one. Thank you.
You mentioned that COLA funding came in later, and so you didn't look at it. But I think it would be quite interesting to look at the impact of government or other funding in that list of unfair
Yeah.
advantages, and how, is that part of what you might do?
Yeah, I think the funding is clearly an issue. So what was interesting in both those cases, so in the HB Studios case, they didn't need any funding, they bootstrapped it, and that is always the best source, right? You don't have to give away equity. In the case of Radian 6, because they'd both done it before, they had strong links to venture capital in Toronto. So they actually raised money from JL Albright, BDC, and there was a third one. But there was no capital available locally, and that was another significant edge for them. But I will add funding in again. All right. Thank you very much.